Now, in all of our tutorial videos so far, we've dealt with a single page and the things that you can do within that. In all likelihood, you're going to want to produce something which has multiple pages, an overall issue. So what we're going to talk about in this video is how to combine those individual pages that you've worked so hard on into a final magazine. Now, the important thing to note here is any pages that you want to include in your final issue need to be built into one single directory. Up to this point, we've been building into the simulator directory on the root. Let's open up one of our documents that we've created. So let's go with our first one, our slideshow document. Here it is. And we've always just been choosing to build to the simulator directory. So let's change that now with the change output directory button. You see it takes us into simulator by default because that's where we were. And let's go here, and I've created a folder here called page builds. Let's choose that. You can see our buttons have updated to say we're going to build to page builds. So we'll just build this page. That's going to be our first page. And let's open a new one. Go back to our documents and let's choose our carousel. Build that to page builds. And let's just have one more for now. Let's have our example actions and build that to page builds. So now if we go to Finder, into our page builds folder, you can see we've now got slideshow, example actions and carousel, all with those little codes appended for vertical tablet because we're doing a iPad portrait build. So that's great. So now what we want to do is go back to here, and this time we want the issue panel. So this is where you can combine all of your individual page builds into one overall issue. First thing you get is a choose directory button. So let's choose page builds because that's where we've just built all of our issues pages into. Now it's worth noting at this point that that directory will be remembered in your preferences so that next time you come in you won't have to keep choosing that directory. And you can see what it's done for us here is it's created two sections. So it's got unused pages, which currently is empty because what it's done is it's put all of our pages into this section here called default section. And here you can see carousel, example actions, slideshow. Now initially it's put them in this order, which is alphabetical because it doesn't know that you want slideshow, then carousel, then example actions. So the first thing that you can do is you can rearrange your pages. So the first way of doing this would just be to click and drag. Let's move that to the top. Alternatively, you can use these buttons here. So let's select the carousel page. You can move it down, you can move it up. Next thing you want to do is maybe give your section a name. So let's put this as our images section. Now sections come into their own when you're using a Chrome, which we'll cover off in a later video. But so you don't have to have sections if you don't want to. But this time we're going to have some sections. So we've called this one images. Let's create a new section with this button here. And let's call this one actions. And we're going to put our example actions in there. So you can either drag it there or you can use these bottom buttons which move it down or up by a section as opposed to just one page position. So there we have our issue. We have a first section called images which has two pages, slideshow and carousel. And then we have our second section of actions which has got a page called example actions in it. And if you remember in some of our previous tutorial videos, when we popped up messages, they said title. This is where you set your issue title. So let's call it My Great Magazine. There we are. And now we're all ready to build. We hit the build button. And now that build's finished, let's close these documents down. And we'll go back to our page builds directory in Finder. And you can see we've got a few extra files in here on top of our page builds that we did earlier. So here's our pages, slideshow, carousel and example actions. We've also got issue layout, which has been generated by the Featurefolio plugin, which just keeps a note of how you want your issue laid out. So that'll have information in it about your sections and your page order. And the build process has produced these files here, build output retina and build output standard with their corresponding zip files. Now what these are is they're two separate builds of the issue, one at standard definition, one at Retina definition, and you also have the option, if you want to produce a combined zip file of standard and Retina bundled in together. Going back to InDesign, that's this option here, combine output. So we'll tick that and we'll hit build, and you can see now we have build output combined with its corresponding zip file. These zip files are what you need to send over to us to upload to our content provider servers. And what will happen then is, depending on what device the user has, whether it's a Retina device or a standard device, our content servers will provide them with the appropriate zip file. So they're not downloading information that they're just not going to use. So going back to InDesign, on the issue panel, you've got a few more options here on the pop-up menu that you can use. Now play around with them. You can tailor your issue exactly how you want it for your users.